Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And I'd like to go fast on this presentation. The biggest confusion in what we've been advocating, which is riba-free banking and finance, has been this percentage sign. Some people call it interest rate, and then some people take it and change the name and call it profit, and some people call it this and that. But in my view, if you want to fix the problem, you have to go to another system, which was the original system used in the international monetary system, which I studied a little bit in my MBA program. And I wanted to share with you some thoughts quickly, again fruitful thoughts for professors to study. And we have one professor here, Mahmoud Al-Gama. And where is the second? There was another professor here. Professor, he's fast asleep. Professor Rafat Abdel Karim, I think, right? And we have Professor Jamal Badawi, also 3 professors. We hope that they will take interest, note of this, and study it. I studied international monetary system at the University of Texas when I was doing my MA program. And I really was very interested in it, and I wrote a lot of papers. And at that time, in 1976, it was the time to change over from the gold standard to the monetary standard. It was a very interesting experience for me. But let's proceed. Next slide. Oh, I should move that. This is an abbreviated presentation which I presented somewhere else in the world in a think tank situation. And I called it Towards Building a Stable Future and a riba-free, faith-based finance and banking system. And I'm very happy to share with you some of the ideas. Again, not as conclusive, but as thought-provoking that will instigate some research ideas. First of all, we talk about currency devaluation. I was in Hong Kong in 1997-98 to attend the International Monetary Fund when we had the Asian crisis. And here is the result of the Asian crisis. On February 16, 1998, the currency was at a certain amount. In June 30, 1998, Indonesia's currency was down 75%, Malaysia down 36%, Thailand 48%, Philippines 36%, and the list goes on. Taiwan actually was 15%, but it declined quite further. And this is a sample of some of the Middle Eastern countries who happen to be Muslim countries. I started doing business in Turkey in 1993. I used to exchange $1 US for 18,000 Turkish liras. When we went back for business in the end of 2002, that was 1.8 million liras for $1 US. And actually it reached 2 million liras for a US dollar, which means the value of the currency went down by over 98%. And this is really part of the story because the rich and the affluent, the generals and the leaders, they all operate in foreign currency, in dollars. Who gets the short end of the stick? It is the poor farmers and the workers who only know the Turkish lira. I was in Turkey, and a friend of mine was building a plant, and he was telling me, you don't believe this, but we have to give our workers food and vitamins because they do not have the money to buy food and vitamins. This is a very resourceful country that some of you, I went with some of you to visit, and it's just a shame for this to happen. And the list goes on and on. At the time, the Egyptian pound was 4.6. Today, it's 6.7, 6.5, and also went down about 40%. And this is a very big problem, and it's caused by a number of mechanisms, and that's simply the printing of money. What's the result? Reduced value of the salary, the savings, the pensions, and the price of goods and services. It raised the value of short-term debt, usually dominated in US dollars, because these countries go out and borrow in US dollars, and then, of course, they have to pay in local currency, and then they exchange it into dollars, which brings a tremendous penalty on the economy. Reduced the credit ratings of the country, and because of that, when they go out and borrow again, they borrow at a very high interest rate, and reduce the economic activity, and it increases unemployment and poverty in the country. Every African country, those who come from Kenya, they can attest to that, or Taiwan. And then the second thing is the freezing of assets. And I don't need to tell you more about the freezing of assets. And then the money printing. Most of the developing countries, actually the United States has printed money quite a bit. They introduced politically independent central banks. They induced them to print money because the decision in the central banks are not independent like many of the developed countries, and they just go ahead and print money. And the debt accumulation without the due democratic process. After 5 or 6 years, the government will stand up and tell the public, well, sorry, I forgot to tell you, we borrowed $20 billion and we have to pay for it. And I'm just trying to dramatize it a little bit. And then without due process, without democratic process, without asking people, should we go and borrow or should you go out and sacrifice a little bit more? And then the leakage outside the economy. And of course, the leakage outside the economy is a very well-known problem. I was born in Egypt, and I just come back from Egypt. One bank lent 70% of its total liabilities, which represents about 10 times its capital, to 5 people. One of them borrowed $5 billion US dollars, and there is not a single one of these dollars are in Egypt today. They are all in French banks. The man was put in jail, escaped, went to France. The prime minister went, got him back in jail, escaped again, and nobody can get him. And I'm just saying about Egypt because I don't want anybody from any other country to feel sad, but believe me, I don't want to name the countries. Every single country, tremendous corruption is going on. And then, of course, interruption of trade with trading partners. If you're producing rice, then how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for the trades, or oil, and so on and so forth? What is fiat money? Fiat money is money that is, according to Webster's definition, made legal by a decree of the government. Paper money was first used by the Chinese, beginning in the Tang Dynasty, 618-907. And during the Ming Dynasty, they used different types of money. In the first United States Depression from 1819 to 1821, fiat money was used in the states of Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, and was quickly abandoned because they knew that it is not a swift thing to do. In times of government weakness and instability, like in the times of wars, no one will accept paper currency because of the promise of government. Promise of government has no value. Of course, we all remember the pictures of big carts of Deutsche Mark during the Hitler era to go out and buy a loaf of bread. So nobody will take that. Mr. Greenspan himself, I don't know if you know this or not, but the United Kingdom Central Bank in May 1999 and announced that they will be selling half of their gold reserves on the market. And that would have created a tremendous pressure on gold prices because you have now an oversupply of gold and prices would go down. He said, and I'm quoting him, in front of the House Banking Committee, gold still represents the ultimate form of payment in the world. And this is a quotation from Mr. Greenspan himself. I call this the final leg to remove riba from our lives. If you look at the jurisprudence, body of jurisprudence that is available, you will find that in the law that zakah is quoted in in gold. If you have 3 ounces of gold worth, it is nisab, or the amount above which you are now liable to pay zakah. When you marry, you pay your dowry or mahriya in gold, in hudud, and compensations payments, and so on and so forth. These are done in gold. The Roman Empire was the first to mint the dinar. So when you hear dinar, it is a Roman Empire currency. It was made out of gold. And when you hear dirham, silver, dirham, it was coined first by the Persian Empire. And they were used as money. If you read the Holy Quran, it says, وَالَّذِينَ يَكْنِزُونَ الذَّهَبَ وَالْفِضَّةَ وَلَا يُنْفِقُونَها فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَبَشِّرْهُمْ بِعَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ. ذهب والفضة, which means gold and silver, is not just the gold and silver, it is the coins as a store of value, as a currency. Now, on gold, after World War II, in 1948, the Allies have concluded, after a lot of negotiations, which I happen to have researched in great detail, the different deliberations of it, they have decided that, well, we're going to honor the United States dollar as a reference currency, and the United States government promises to pay every holder of an ounce of gold, 43 US dollars. And of course, the Marshall Plan came to develop the economies of Japan and the European continent after World War II. We printed a lot of money, and it's a very well-known story that Charles de Gaulle, who used to run France in 1968-69, he discovered that he has tons of US dollars in his vaults, and he said, well, I don't need these dollars, send them back to Fort Knox. And as a matter of fact, he was afraid that half the gold reserves at Fort Knox were transported with C-130 airplanes to the London Metal Exchange. The second floor of the London Metal Exchange actually collapsed because of the weight of the gold in it. And of course, at that time, Mr. Nixon realized the weight of the problem, and he closed down the gold window, what we used to call the gold. What's a gold window? It is this relationship between a US dollar and the gold. Every ounce of gold is equal to 43 US dollar. Of course, the dollar started going up to first 100, 126, and then it went as high as 800 and some dollars during the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Just going quickly, I'll give you a background. So the dirham and the dinar actually were started during the time of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa. And the dinar is 22 karat gold and equivalent to 4.3 grams of gold. And the silver and the relationship was also defined. The first Muslim coin were struck by Uthman ibn Affan because the Umar ibn al-Khattab coin was a Roman coin on which you have a stamp, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and so on. The minting of the dirham was done by Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, who is the man who built the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem. Of course, there are many attempts to eradicate the significance of gold and so on and so forth. And of course, the gold window was closed by Mr. Nixon. What is price fixing? This is very interesting because we should also know this. Who decides on the price of gold? It's decided by a process called gold fixing. And gold fixing is decided by 5 major banks in the world. And it used to be decided upon once a day, and then to cope up with the world, they made it twice a day. And this is a little bit detail on that. These 5 banks are Standard Chartered Bank, Deutsche Bank, Rothschild and Sons. Rothschild and Sons actually happens to be the owner of the building where the fixing takes place. And it's a very animated way of raising flags and lowering flags. And the Republic Bank of New York, and of course HSBC. These are the holding companies, but they just went in and bought these traders, and they carry their names. And you look at the supply and demand, and the price fixing takes 15. And literally it is price fixing because it's not a supply and demand situation. It's just a few people fixing the price for the rest of the world. It takes 15 minutes. In 1975, during the Islamic Revolution, the afternoon fixing lasted over an hour and 39 minutes because it was a true supply and demand surge situation. 15 minutes thing is just price fixing. This is a very interesting study that I want to get Mahmoud's interest going to explain to us all the ramifications of it. This is gold prices. And if this can extend, I want to share with you. I did a lot of work. My PhD thesis was on modeling of different curves and statistical analysis and things like this. But this is gold. And you see, this is a very interesting band where gold price is kept constant. You know how it's kept constant? Through a number of mechanisms. Let me share with you. One of the investment banks, I happen to know who they are. They go to the central bank and they say, you have all of this gold sitting down in your walls doing nothing. Can I borrow it at 1.5%? Say, okay, we'll give it to you at 1.5%. This is all on paper. They take it, put it on paper, and then they sell it. And when they sell it, there is, of course, oversupply of gold in the market. What happens to the gold price? It goes down. And what do they do with the cash? They invest it in instruments. They make 4% of it. So they pocket the spread between 1.5% and 4%. That's the first income. After 3 months, gold prices are down. They buy it again at a lower price, right? And they give it back to the bank and they make the spread again on the difference of price. And this has been going on and on and on and on. And this actually what made gold a very politicized currency. And you can see this is when gold was fixed. This is when the window was closed. This is the Islamic Revolution in Iran. And this is when the technique of forward selling for the mines, and I don't want to go technical, but we'll leave it there. This is a very interesting, and that's why I asked Ted Chandler and Sabr Salam to weigh. This is a very interesting chart because everything else is different. This is the price of a house in U.S. in gold terms. I said, suppose we pay for this house in ounces of gold. How many ounces of gold would take to buy a house? This is what it took to buy a house in 67, about 700 ounces of gold. If we were to follow the gold window with a constant exchange of $43 an ounce of gold, this is the price of a house. You and I would be here, but wouldn't be crazy about the volatility, Ted, right? This is what it takes to buy a house today, and even higher. 5,000 ounces of gold to buy. This is the median price of a house, of course. 5,000 ounces of gold. And this is a very interesting aberration that happens in the United States and some of the developing countries, mainly the United Kingdom. And what it says is it costs you a lot of money to own a piece of the rock because it costs you money to buy all of these merchandise, the concrete, the bricks, the durables, and that means things are becoming very expensive home here. And if somebody wants to emulate us to build a house like this in Bangladesh or Pakistan, they have to pay through their nose. And that's why the only people that can afford these homes are people who are trading with us. So it's not really something that can be done in many of these countries. Does this make an impact on you, Ted? It's a very interesting slide. I didn't believe it when my assistant, I asked him to collect the data, and I told him, you're wrong, show me the numbers, and I looked at it. But look at the other commodities, and that's another problem in the world. And I said, okay, everybody has got to eat rice. So the only data on rice we have is the price of rough rice. Look at the price of rough rice in gold terms. This is the price of rough rice if we were to follow the gold standard. It's deflated. And now you know why most of the rice producers, farmers, are suffering greatly in many countries. In actual terms, they're handling paper money, which is a lot, but in fact, in gold terms, it is essentially nothing. And look at how much it is stabilized. These are all traders' aberrations, these people who are doing commodity trading, and that's the reason for that volatility. And then I said, also we'll have to eat meat, live cattle. And the live cattle business, if you are in the market doing options and futures on cattle, it's not a very volatile market. People in Kentucky Fried Chicken and the like, they are aware of these things. But here, you see how stable this thing is. And again, if you were a farmer raising cattle, you really are not doing very well, be it in Texas or Colorado or wherever in the country you are. And that's why people don't do ranching anymore. They want to leave ranching and go out to the cities and enjoy life. And then gold versus crude oil, and I came from the crude oil business. This is the crude oil prices. And of course, again, this is during the Islamic Revolution of Iran, and then prices went down and stabilized. Now, what happened in 1987-89, the Iran-Iraq war stopped, and Iraq was supposed to pay back to Kuwait and Saudi Arabia for the huge amount of armaments they used to kill about 1.5 million Iranians. And of course, to pay him back, they had to pay him in oil. So what did they do? They worked together to reduce oil prices so he can pay 1.5 barrels of oil instead of 1 barrel of oil. This is all documented. And of course, our friend who is shown on television these days quite a bit went in and did what he did to Kuwait. But this is very interesting, and you see the volatility of the oil prices and so on. Now, had we kept the oil window, which is a $43 for an ounce of gold, look at the oil prices. Is that good, or this is good? The volatility. Of course, I like this better because then you can plan, you can do things. The next slide is another fascinating slide. This is natural gas. And you can see natural gas went up and down with most of the supply coming from two countries, actually, Algeria and the North Sea is a little bit, but it's Algeria and Qatar. That's why Qatar is in the news, because the biggest natural gas producer is Qatar. Now, and then look at this big spike. Now, this big spike, you look at the red color, which is in US dollars, you say, well, it doesn't have any significance. But it makes a significance if you look at it in gold. Look at this blip. You know what that blip is? This is an Enron blip. What Enron did, and this is really sad, and that shows you the value of faith-based financing and banking. What Enron did, because they were all very well-educated young men and women, graduates of Harvard and Yale and the best schools in the country, but they forgot to teach them one thing, and that is faith-based ethics, what is allowed and what's not allowed. What they did, they would go in, and you know California has a lot of natural gas and electricity. They would pretend as if they are from Colorado. They buy the natural gas and the electricity for the benefit of Colorado on paper, not physically, on paper. And then there is no supply of natural gas and electricity in California. So when California wants to buy it, they sell it back to California at 10 times the price. And that is what the aberration is. And if you call this finance, it's nothing but highway robbery, and it should be stopped as soon as possible. There are some research items. I'm going to spare you that, and I'm going to leave this to Mahmoud. By the way, all of these papers and presentation will be on our website. You can do it. We need to understand the history of the monometallic and bimetallic and cismetallic, symmetallic, and commodity reserve currency systems. We need to know the effect of the vast gold discovery in Canada and South Africa, the argument that Tariq was trying to respond to. The problem of inadequate international reserves, again, we need to study that in great detail, not just a rebuttal, a soundbite rebuttal. We need to do it. We need to know the effect of differentials in interest rates on the stability of the system, the advantages of going gold over floating and adjustable peg. And I wrote papers on this subject back in '76, actually. And what happens if gold is effectively monetized, and what happens if you have a gold bubble? And we need to look at these research projects. I wish I have the courtesy of going and working in the university. I would be doing a lot of this research. We need to simulate the past intercurrency trades, gold and dollars. We need to develop a computer like the war games on the computer, you know, that's used by the Pentagon and so on, and have two trading groups who try to compete with each other and see what the outcome will be if it is currency and it is gold. This is just dreaming, the Mahmoud. Develop scenarios and develop ways and strategies to disengage thinking in hard currency. And by God's grace, we hope it will be done. Thank you very much.